Allie, come here. Are you going live then?
I'm live. Hi, everyone. This is so weird because I'm live and you can see me, but I can't see you. So just so I know this is working well, send me a link. This is so fun and fancy. Is anybody out there? Hey, Errol. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, guys. So fun. You're welcome for doing this. Thank you for being here for the live experience. I think it makes all the difference. Just moving some things around on my desktop. Make sure I have my notes. Cool. It says there's about 9 people watching, so I guess we'll get to it in just a few minutes. I'm going to cover everything as far as technicalities go. So we're not going to talk about performance, a little bit, the technical side of some performance aspects, but I think that this will help a lot of you. Can a few more people just say hey, so I know that it's really working for most peeps? Say something in the little chat. Hi, Scott Grady. Anybody else here? Okay, let's get into it. I don't want to take up too much time. Happy Easter, everyone. So, as far as making an awesome self-tape audition, the first thing I want to remind everybody is to make sure that you read directions. Read them a couple of times because every casting office is different. And so there might be some specific things that certain casting directors like or don't like, specifically when it comes to the slate, which we'll talk more about. So read directions. Use common sense is another one. If you have a question about something, try to use some common sense. If you're not sure, consider the viewer. I always think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of whoever would be watching and think about what their experience might be like. So that's another general rule to follow, is what is this going to be like for someone to watch? But not just what is it going to be like for someone to watch, but what is it going to be like for someone to watch within hundreds of other submissions. So keep in mind that casting directors are looking at self-tapes, sometimes hundreds of them, one after the other. And so if you get really obnoxious or take a long time about your slate or adding music or title cards and all of this, they just sort of want to get to it. I think so. Just try to keep that in mind. Also, remember that casting is a process of elimination. So a lot of times there might be a handful of people that are right for something, and they have to sort of narrow it down. And so something really tedious could be the thing that eliminates you. So I always think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're going in live too, and especially that. I mean, if you're rude to the person in the office or have an awkward interaction or are late or are memorized or whatever it might be, any reason they have to eliminate you makes their job easier. So I always think it's really important to just keep asking yourself, how do I not get eliminated? And the other is, as a rule, if you're not sure about something, about how to approach a move or prop situation or an angle or however you're going to do it, what is going to be the least distracting from the performance? You want the performance to be the main ingredient and the thing that we all watch. So you don't have to get fancy as far as everything else goes. It's really important to have a good performance. So if you're going to add anything on top of that and it's going to distract from the performance or from what you want the person watching it to feel, then probably don't do it, is a good general rule. So the things that you will need for a self-tape is obviously a camera, which your smartphone is fine. An iPhone is totally fine as long as it's HD. If you have a very, very old phone, maybe don't use that. And if you are going to use a phone, make sure that you're framed horizontally and not vertically. This is really important because then when they're watching it, they're seeing this much and a lot of black instead of the way that I'm probably appearing on your screen right now, which is how you want to look. So always horizontally. Make sure you have a tripod. And if you don't want to spend money, you don't really need to. You can get a little, I wish I would have brought my little, I have a little tiny tripod over by my desk area. And so I'll show you that I have that because that's a nice one you can put on a tabletop and use. But you don't want shaky cam. So you don't want whoever your camera operator is or your, thank you, or your reader or whoever is operating your camera to have to hold it. Probably if they're reading for you, they'll need to look at the sides anyway. So I have this little guy. I'm probably got it on Amazon. This is a Targus, but there's a lot of things like this. So I can put my camera right on here and set it up on a tabletop. It has legs that extend, doesn't quite go high enough to catch me when I'm standing up, but I can usually put it on something. So this is a really nice thing to have. There's ones too that I think they're only like $10 or $15 you can get on Amazon that are bendy. So you can wrap them around something, which has come in handy when I've been traveling. I was in an Airbnb once and I had to put myself on tape and the furniture was really weird, but I was able to like wrap it around a curtain rod to hold it steady. So I would get something like that. But if you don't have that, just make sure that you lean it up against a stack of books on a table. That's fine. The key is you don't want it handheld and shaky. You want it stationary. As far as lighting goes, they just need to be able to see you. So right now, this is just, I'm near an open window and I'm lit well enough. You can see me, right? So you don't have to get super fancy with lighting. Now, when it's dark and I don't get a lot of natural sunlight in my apartment, so this is like as good as it gets, which is kind of nice for right now. But I have a lighting kit, so I have a couple softbox lights which you can get and use. But again, I've had to do self-tapes when I was traveling and I moved around the furniture in a hotel room to get lamps just so that there's not a lot of crazy shadows on my face, not a lot of crazy distracting shadows in the background. You don't have to be a total perfectionist about it. If you can see a little bit of a shadow, that's probably okay. Again, the general rule is this distracting from my performance? So if it's not, then don't worry about it too much. Now, here's the thing. If you can make it awesome and beautiful looking technically, do that. And use this time to take the information that you're going to get from this video to find a dedicated space in your house or apartment that you can use, and how you like the lighting setup and what looks good for you and how, what your background is and all of that. And just kind of get down a routine and be able to recreate it. Another good rule is generally you want to recreate the setup that you see in a casting office. So, most of you, sorry, my computer did something weird. So most of you have been in casting rooms before. And if you haven't, ask your friends that have to see what it's like, but you might be able to find something you probably can find something online, particularly on like Backstage, some video of what a casting space looks like and replicate that. They have a light, usually where you can see. They have a camera, they have a tripod, They have a backdrop. So if anyone has a question, by the way, go ahead and put it in the chat. If it's a topic I haven't covered yet, wait, I might be getting there. But if I moved on, like I stopped talking about tripods and you have a question about tripods, go ahead and you can ask it in the chat. Background, obviously, is another important thing. So this is a wall in my apartment that I painted this gray blue color, and I love this color for a background. For a lot of self-tapes, the instructions are just use a white wall or an off-white wall or anything that's a plain background, which is fine. I think this is much prettier. When you go to some of the top tier fancy agents in LA and they have a room dedicated for putting actors on tape when they have to do a self-tape submission, this is usually the color of what the background looks like that I've seen, like in Paradigm and some of the nicer agencies, Gersh, they have a background like this. So I like this color. I think it's more flattering. So if you can paint a wall that color, great. If not, getting a sheet is fine. Make sure that it's ironed or steamed because that can be distracting. Just make it look nice. But if you just have a white or off-white wall, that's fine too. The main idea here is to not have anything super distracting in the background. Like obviously if this were a self-tape, I would frame it so that, well, that's my green screen, but that you would just see that background, right? Sound. So make sure you're heard. You don't have to get a fancy mic. The microphone in your camera or in your smartphone is probably good enough. I would just make sure that your reader is mindful of their volume so that they're not way louder than your performance is. But you do want to hear them. So that is really important. And it is important to have a good reader too. So I would recommend getting another actor, someone that's just good at reading, that's good at reading material to be the reader, because that can be a major distraction to a self-tape when a casting director is watching and the reader is terrible or really loud or really super monotone. It can be really distracting. So have a good reader, make sure that we can hear them too, because they're watching an entire scene. They're watching your performance, but in the context of a whole scene. So you want to be able to hear the reader, just not louder than you are. And also make sure that your reader is mindful of page turning, because that obviously can be a big obnoxious sound thing. And you too, with your sides, which we'll talk about handling sides and whether you should hold them or not. But make sure if you do have them and you're turning pages that you're not turning them over a line of dialogue so that you can still be heard. Again, the general rule is make sure that they can see you well and hear you well, right? And your performance is awesome and nothing is distracting from that. If you don't have a reader that lives in your house, particularly during this time where we're all on lockdown and self-quarantined, if you don't have a reader with you that's good, something that I've done, again, when I've been traveling, is I've had my laptop with a video chat with Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts, FaceTime video chat, what have you, with, and I'll have my husband at home video chatting with me, the dialogue. So I'll email him the script so he can be my reader off camera, and then I use my phone to record it. So you can do that at home. If you don't have anybody, just get a buddy to FaceTime with you or Skype with you to be your reader, and have your reader here and your camera here, which brings me to Eyeline, which sounds like a question that somebody had. So the next thing is, where should your eyeline be? I've noticed that a lot of actors new to the self-tape audition or auditioning in general, when there's a camera in the room, will look into the camera, and you don't want to do that. Now for commercials, it might be different. when you go in the room, if they want you to look at the camera or not. But as far as theatrical auditions, you want to look just off camera. So you want to look at the reader, look at a human being just off camera. So if you're going to place your phone or your camera here, have your reader be as close to it as possible. So you don't want them over here because then that's really profile, right? You want, there's my eyeline. So that's something to play around with. And a lot of times I'll ask my reader to, I'll have them look into the camera, into the monitor, and I'll look at them and say, how does my eyeline look? Because sometimes from the other end, it looks like I'm looking way up high when I'm not. It can be a very subtle difference and it can look really weird. So that's something to play with ahead of time too. Just like I'm telling you, figure out your background and your lighting, and your sound and all of that, play around with eyeline, but also, you know, on the day when you're actually doing the audition, just make sure it doesn't look super weird. But eyeline, I think, is really important because, again, it can be very distracting if you're really profile or it looks like you're looking right into the camera. So that's something really important. So the slate. So some of you that, if you don't know what a slate is, if you're very new to this, that's okay. I got in trouble because some of my very first students that I had in my acting class, I never told what a slate was, and they went to their first audition and they felt really embarrassed. So the slate is, before you do your audition, it's the beginning of the tape where you say your name. Usually it's your name and your height. Sometimes it's your name and your height and your representation. Sometimes if you're not represented and it's an independent project, something non-union, it'll be your name and your contact information. So again, follow directions. When in doubt, if they don't give you any, say your name or your name and your height. So that is said into the camera. That is your first connection with the viewer of your tape. So don't make a big to-do about it. Just like I said earlier on in this, how you want to consider the viewer, that they're watching tape after tape after tape. So if you can imagine that tape after tape after tape, they're watching these slates that are like really dramatic and like these actors clowning around, how annoying that must be when they have to just get, so 5-10 seconds, just let them get a sense of your personality. Don't feel like you have to slate in character. In fact, you shouldn't slate in character. But yes, you want to slate in the tone of the piece that you're doing. So if you're doing something very dramatic and heartfelt or really emotional, and you're about to go into this really emotional place when you do the read, don't feel like you have to be like, hi, I'm April and I love Slurpees or whatever you might say. That's my thing. Don't steal my thing. I'm just kidding. It's not my thing. So be you and be normal. Don't be sobbing and emotionally wrecked, but you can be a little bit in the tone of the piece. You can have more of a serious tone because, I mean, they know that then you're going to make a transition to doing something emotional. So, let's see. Frame. Make sure you're framed sort of how I am here. I hope that it's coming across similar to. So there's a little bit of headspace here, and it's like, you know, to right here. So like mid-chest, you know, your bra line. Second or third shirt button is usually a good rule. Pretty much centered. If you're a little bit off center, that's okay too. Don't be obviously like way in the corner. That's weird. Again, nothing distracting. But to be framed just about like how I am here. If you're going to do anything super physical that needs to be seen, we'll address that in a little bit, physicality and stuff. But your performance should be able to come across with whatever you do within this space here. Are there any questions so far about any of that before I move on to Oh, you know what? Here's another thing I think is important. If you're reading and there are multiple characters that you're talking to, um, so if the scene is between you as a character and more than one other person, you can just look at the reader for all of them because again, consider the viewer. They know the scene. They know that you're talking to many people. Sometimes, and this is where you use common sense and just see what works and watch it back and consider the viewer as far as if it makes sense to have a person that you talk to here and then also maybe your child is down here and that works great, then do it. But as a rule, you can make the reader all the people in the scene. Just keep in mind that you might talk to each of those characters differently. We don't talk to all people the same. We have a different tone and a different energy and relationship with different people. So keep that in mind, but don't feel like you have to be like, great, that's my mom and my dad's over there and then my brother. If it looks too all over the place, it's going to be really, really hard to follow. So whatever is going to give you a more focused, intentional performance, the scene's going to come across the best. Do that. Do you walk into and out of frame? Was a question. So yes, you can. Don't feel like you have to do anything fancy or crazy just for the sake of mixing it up and making it different. But sometimes it works to do that, and that is okay, I think. And from what I've heard from some casting directors. Now, a lot of these are guidelines based on my experience and what I've heard casting directors say too, and what I've experienced casting things on the other side. But they all have different preferences. So please don't hold that against me. Consider who your person is. So here's an example. I put something on tape last summer, I think, and I was somebody at a party that was walking into the kitchen to get more ice and ran into someone in there and had an awkward conversation. And I think my first line was like, "Hey, cool party, huh?" And the character was kind of quirky. And so I did the whole, like, I kind of like was like there was music, kind of walked into frame and made the entrance because I felt like my awkward entrance into the kitchen, being alone with this person, was weird. And I wanted to show that because that felt like an important part of the story. It felt like an important part of the emotional life of the character, of what that felt like. And I wanted to convey that. And so yes, you can do it. And I think I left the same way. It's like once I kind of was finished with the conversation, I was like, all right, well, I'll get you later. And I bebopped out of there. I think it worked. So again, use common sense. If it works for the story and it's not distracting and it actually adds to the story that you're telling, then I would say go for it. If we decide to shift eyeline for emotional reasons, is that okay? Absolutely. Again, as long as it's not super distracting. If there's a reason for it, great. But if it ends up being something where someone might be like, why is he shifting his eyeline so much? I would maybe rethink that. I think it's really important to realize how much, like, how we come across on camera. I'm a very animated person, and I also I listen from a head place a lot, and even in my work, so I'll do a lot of nodding, and then I've had to catch myself on camera that I'll be doing this a lot as a listener, or just be shifting around too much, and it's just not, my cat's meowing. It's just not, it's distracting. So as much as you can sit still in the scene, I think is good. Again, that depends on what the scene is and what the character is too. But in this case that I'm describing, I found it incredibly distracting. I have to catch myself on that a lot. Okay, so on to wardrobe. And this goes, obviously, this isn't just for self-tape. This is going into a live audition too, particularly because when we're going in, more often than not, somebody's putting you on tape. So even if you're going in live for a casting assistant, if it's a pre-read or a casting director, sometimes even if the producers are in the room, they're still taping it. So just keep in mind what it's going to look like on camera, because chances are they're going to be going back and reviewing that tape and somebody else's tape to do the comparison to really make a choice. So keep in mind how you're going to come across on that tape. It makes a big difference. So crazy patterns I would stay away from unless it's like a really intentional choice. But otherwise, solids are great. Colors that are flattering for you, that also work for the character. You don't have to wear a costume. If you're auditioning to be a doctor, you don't have to put on a stethoscope and a lab coat. If you have those things and you want to do that, that's probably fine. Most casting directors that I've talked to are like, oh God, like we don't need you to do that. The best way I've ever heard it put is wear what the character would wear to a job interview. So if it's a doctor, what would the doctor wear to a job interview? Probably a suit and tie and jacket, right? Or if it's a lawyer, they probably would wear a suit, right? Or something nice. So try to keep that in mind. Don't feel like you have to be a wardrobe person, but obviously don't completely ignore what the character is, whatever makes sense for the character at the time. So no crazy pattern. Some casting directors are so specific. I just recently heard a casting director say that they prefer that actors wear blues and grays because they think it looks nice on camera, which I thought was so funny because it's like, okay, I mean, always, like, does that depend on the character? So that's good to know. But again, I think just consider the viewer. Is it pleasing to the eye to look at? But obviously, story is the most important, and honoring the character, just as long as it's not technically distracting. When they tell you not to wear makeup, they're lying. I'm just going to say it. It is a lie. So some breakdowns and some instructions will say, don't wear any makeup at all. And this isn't just for self-tapes. This is going into casting. It is a lie. Wear some makeup. Wear the makeup look that looks like you're not wearing any makeup, right? So don't wear crazy lipstick and eyeliner and stuff like that, but wear a little bit of makeup. Casting directors will tell you that too. Even though they're the ones that say no makeup, they're lying. They're like, just makeup that looks like you're not wearing makeup, but makes you look better than you look without makeup. I'm just here to tell you the truth. As far as props go, don't pantomime is the first rule. So don't, don't act like you have a cup and you're taking a drink. Just don't do it. Don't pantomime anything. It just takes us out of the reality. Your job as the actor is to do sort of a play for them. You're giving them a mini performance, is how Katrine McGregor puts it, a casting director friend of mine. And so do a little play for us and make it entertaining and feel real and have a beginning, middle, and end and all of those things. So the rule for props is you can wear or use anything that you might naturally have on you. So a bottle of water is fine. A pen or a pencil is fine. A purse, a jacket. Those are things you might naturally have on you. Also, you can use your sides as props. So if you have documents you're referring to, let your sides be the documents, right? Or the menu, or any other prop that your sides can be. I used my props once as a serving tray because I played a waitress, and the casting director actually complimented me on it because she thought it was such a clever choice, and it wasn't distracting at all. The key is you got to be consistent. So if that's true, then this had to be my serving tray the whole time. I couldn't then suddenly be like, this with it, right? Unless I was doing it with the tray, but I established that it was a tray that probably had something on it. So I just let it keep doing that. So you can get creative with it, but don't be crazy and don't do anything distracting. I've had them be a tray of cookies before. And that really worked because it felt weird. I didn't want to pantomime it, but it felt weird not to have the tray of cookies because it was such an important part of the scene was, look what I made for you. So I used that. So I hope that's a good example. Some questions. If the character is sloppy, should we look sloppy or still be presentable? Is this one too?
Yeah.
Okay. Character wins, story wins. So yeah, look sloppy. If the character calls for it, yes, dress like the character. So if you're going to be a homeless person, yeah. Again, just don't feel like you have to go crazy. You don't have to go overboard and like roll around in oil and grease and make yourself really dirty. Just don't wear like your brand new Gap polo, right? But yeah, maybe we're like an older worn thrift store shirt or something like that. So sloppy is totally fine. Again, just try to stay away from looking too costumey or doing anything super distracting. How do you end the scene, walk out of frame? I mean, you can walk out of frame, like the example that I used a little while ago about how I danced into the kitchen and had a little exchange and then danced my way out. That's how I ended the scene. But usually how you want to end the scene is obviously the last line. But I think more importantly is what is the moment right after your last line of dialogue. So try to think in terms of what might my character be doing next, or where might my character be going next. What emotional state am I in now that I've discovered whatever I've discovered as the scene went on. So that, and then end it, just cut it right after a moment of where your character is living emotionally when it's over. So sorry about my cat. I'm sorry, not sorry. I mean, she's really cute. Sorry, Alice. As far as actions go, a lot of people ask, do I sit or stand? Well, how do you think you'll be filming the scene? So if the scene is at a dinner table, yeah, go ahead and sit. I think the character would be sitting and comfortable. If you're having a conversation with somebody on the sidewalk outside of the school and you're waiting to pick up your kid, then obviously do it standing. Don't do it sitting if you would probably shoot it standing. As a rule, stand up unless there's a good reason to sit down, I would say. But pick one. So there are exceptions, and there are exceptions to all of these things I'm telling you, by the way. That's why I started this out with like, use common sense and consider the viewer. And sometimes these rules don't apply, but generally this is what the best practices are. So if you're going to sit. If you're going to stand. Obviously, there are exceptions to those. Sometimes somebody might be sitting in the scene and then get up to follow someone out, or for whatever reason they might be doing that. If you can get through the scene and hit all those emotional beats without making that move, do it without making that move. Only really do the movement if it's really necessary and the scene really calls for it. Otherwise, try to stay where you are. And also, if you are going to do that move, make sure that you have a great camera operator that can anticipate when you're going to get up, and you guys time that out so that the camera can follow you. And again, it's lovely to watch and not distracting at all. Now, as far as other actions, so this gets a little bit trickier. How and when to move in frame. I think I need you to be more specific. How much to move your upper body either forward toward the reader or to the side. oh, how much movement within this frame. Again, I just feel like don't do anything distracting. But if the character's super crazy and physical, and the way you would shoot this is maybe be like running back and forth in the kitchen, then maybe, yeah, take up more space in the frame. I wouldn't overthink it. I would try to just sit still with it as much as you can, unless it really requires movement for the scene to be effective, for the viewer to feel what it is that they're supposed to feel. I hope that helps. If there is a big movement, yeah, use your body for sure. Don't just be a talking head. That's, I think, one of the most cringe-worthy things about watching actors sometimes is that they are just talking heads and it's not in their body at all. So yes, use your body to express as much as you can. Again, as long as it's not crazy and distracting. If you need more clarification on that, please let me know. So, okay, I want to talk more about actions and props. I don't think I'm quite done with props. So, sometimes there are actions written into the scene, and it's difficult to do them because it's just us in front of a camera, right? So sometimes there's a kiss or a hug, or a slap or a punch. Sometimes there's a lot of action, and so those to me are always the worst, because you get the signs and you're like, how do I do this? So I say, if you sell the emotional beat, whatever the emotional beat of that action is, find a way to convey that emotionally or with some other movement with yourself. Again, don't pantomime a kiss. I have, and it was for a sitcom, like multi-camera Audition. I have done a hug, because that was like a big part of the character, is like how aggressively and excitedly she hugged people she didn't know. And so I did like like I hugged myself and like grunted, and it was funny and it worked. And so that was fine, but if you can just, that kind of feels like a hug. So try to think of other things, like physicality things that you can do, or emotional beats that you can create that'll sell that moment without totally distracting from the scene. Don't like face slap people or punch people. But I have used the sides for those reasons too. So again, sometimes it's just about selling the energy of the moment so that the viewer feels that. So I have, like, when it was, and there's an action where I would be like hitting somebody or slapping somebody or something. I smacked my hand with my sides, particularly if if casting director doesn't see it coming. It's startling, which is great, because it's effective, because when somebody slaps somebody, it's a little startling. So it sort of sells the energy of the moment. If you can get away with not doing it at all and just playing the emotional beats, don't worry about it. Don't overthink the physicality. But if you can use your sides to, there's so many things you can do, right? Get creative in that way. Also, so recently I was coaching an actress, and she, part of her audition was like, in the middle of the scene, she snaps a guy's neck and kills him instantly. So it was like, and it's, obviously this is like a major beat in the scene. It's like she says something and she's like, "Oh, take that," and then she's kind of got a little line afterwards. So that being said, I was like, she can't not do anything, but I didn't want her to fake snap somebody's neck. Well, this actress happened to be a black belt in Krav Maga. And I was like, can you do some sort of fight move, like something that makes it look like you know what you're doing? And we also wanted to show the casting director that physically we wanted them to be able to see that she could fight. She could do a fight scene. She could do fight choreography, that she had the stature for it, and the the movability for it, what have you. I don't know if that's a real word. So she did some, I'm not going to do it as good as she did, but she did like a thing. She did like a Krav Maga sort of move that just looked like a cool karate move thing that only took herself to do, but was totally effective. She not only got the part, it's an awesome part too. It's recurring on this badass show and she's awesome in it. But the casting director actually liked it, like said something about that, how well that worked. So again, if you can find a way to sell the energy of the moment, get creative, as long as it doesn't distract, but it adds to the story and what's happening in the scene. So in that circumstance, it ended up working out really well. And I felt like it was a risk we were taking. So immediately I asked her afterwards, like, what did they say about that? And it worked, and she booked it. So was there another question? Is this old? Okay. Physical stuff. I think I covered a lot of that. Okay. Props to, just if you don't absolutely have to be holding or showing or pantomiming the prop, don't give them so much power. You can talk about something without it actually being in your hands. It can be sitting on the table in front of you. So again, don't overthink it. But sometimes you have to get creative. There are exceptions to everything. This business, this art form, and this life is full of paradoxes. So the one thing that I might tell you would ruin scene for you might actually be the thing that ends up being the brilliant thing. So think outside the box. Be creative. This is an art form too. So keep that in mind. The actual auditioning, the business of the career, the self-tape, the audition approach, all these choices you make, it's all creative. It's all part of the art form. So learn how to have fun and use your artist brain for those things. So I think I've covered most of the performance stuff. I'm going to get into, wait, is there anything that can happen at an audition that might make you want to change your prepared approach? Sure. So this isn't really a self-tape question, but I'll answer it anyway. Is there anything that can happen? Well, yeah, they can give you an adjustment, obviously, is the first one. I mean, I guess it could happen that sometimes you could go and then be looking at your sides and sort of like see something that you kind of missed that changes the way, like, oh, I didn't notice that, or I never made the connection that that's her dead sister back from the dead. Whatever it is. Yeah, then change your obviously do whatever is going to work. So there are circumstances that could happen, but I think the most common one is probably that you'll get an adjustment, that they'll give you more information. And sometimes they'll do that because they've seen a lot of actors make a certain choice that made them realize that maybe they weren't very clear in the breakdown, or that the writing isn't clear. And so they say, oh, by the way, a lot of people are doing this, but we just want to let you know this is the missing piece of information, so don't do that thing. It is more than okay for you to say, oh, great, given that new information, can I have a little more time? And then go back out and work out your stuff. If you do it and you're given an adjustment and you immediately know how to make that adjustment, great, just do it. But if you need more time, if it's a big shift in what you prepared, ask for time. Say, great, love that note. Can I have some time? How much time can I have? I've gotten adjustments and got new information and taken an hour, and you can take that long if you need it, to make sure that this is your one chance. So if you're going to do it, do your best, right? So I hope that answers that. Don't add music or anything crazy. Oh yes. So as far as your self-tape goes, after you've done it, don't feel like you have to do a bunch of crazy editing stuff. I've heard from casting directors that can be really annoying. Again, just think about that they're looking one after the other. So as quickly as you can get in there, give them a sample of your work and then get out. They really appreciate it because they're very busy. They don't have a lot of time. So you don't have to do fancy opening music credits or title cards or anything like that unless it's asked for. Otherwise, just do what they ask you to do and knock it out of the park. As far as sides go, yes, you can have your sides in your hands, of course. If you only have one line or 3 or 4 lines, don't have your sides in your hands. I mean, just memorize it at that point. It really, I think, looks lazy to a casting director. It's like 3 lines and you have to keep looking down. They want to hire a professional. When you get hired to be on a television show or a film set, you don't get a lot of rehearsal. They don't rehearse. They book you, you show up, you go through hair and makeup, you put your wardrobe on, you go to set, you block it for the cameras so the cameras know what's happening, so the crew knows what their job is for the scene. And then you go away and eat a snack, and when the camera's ready, you come back and you shoot it. So when you audition, you have to show them what you are planning to do when you show up on set. So it's not good enough to be like, well, this will, and I'm used to be guilty of that. This will give them a sense of my choices. They'll get an idea of what I'll do if they hire me. You got to show them this is what I'm bringing to the table. So accents. So somebody had a question about accents. Should they be used in self-tape stage, Southern accent or Western? So usually I think breakdowns will speak to that, particularly if it's set in the South and they don't want to hear a bunch of bad Southern accents. They'll specifically say, don't worry about the accent. So that's one of those where I would follow directions. And then if it's not mentioned, don't be afraid to ask either. I mean, if you have an agent, have your agent ask. If you know the casting director personally, if this is a breakdown that you got because it's a local thing, ask them about that. Or do 2 takes. Do a take with and without it and label them with Southern accent, without Southern accent, so they can decide which one they want to listen to. So that might not be a bad idea. Again, I feel like that is a case-by-case basis. You know, if it's really obvious that the character would have an accent, they're probably going to put that in a breakdown if it's necessary. If it's a choice that you're making, if you cannot absolutely murder an accent, whatever it is, don't do it. If it's going to be inconsistent at all and it's a choice you're making, I would say just don't do it unless you can do it really, really well, would be my advice. Don't give them a reason to eliminate you, right? Okay, so back to memorizing and holding sides. So yeah, if it's a couple of lines, don't hold the sides unless you're going to use them as a prop. If it's a lot of material and you don't feel confident in having it memorized, memorize it as best you can, but then just have it in your hand. And I always think it's really good to just know the material well enough that you know when you should turn the page without, like, you know, to do this without having to look at it. Because I know that when I say this, I'm on page 4 now. That way, if I do have to in character find the line, I can do it and not have to break character and go looking for something, right? Then maybe start over and do a retake. That's the beauty of the self-tapes. You can do it as much as you want, as many times as you need to. But it's also good practice to be able to nail it in one take for when you do go on live auditions, because you can't start over and you can never break character. If you break character in an audition, they are going to assume that you are going to do it on set a lot, and they don't have time for that. So get used to staying in character and just whatever it takes to find the line and then get right back in it. Whatever you do, don't break character. If it is a lot of dialogue and you don't think that you can memorize it, or you get the material and your appointment's really fast or your turnaround is really, really quick and you don't have time, memorize the first 3 lines. because at least you can have a really strong start. I would make sure you know the first 3 lines and the last 2 or 3 lines, so that if in the middle of it you're having to look down at all, that's fine, but at least you're not starting the audition like this or ending it like this, but you're ending it here with the connection with the reader. Don't paraphrase. Also, memorize your lines too, so you can focus on your performance. That's another kind of no-brainer. It's like you can just put more into your performance if you don't have to worry about what the dialogue is. And it's good to practice memorizing, because obviously if you get the job on set, you're going to have to know your lines. And a lot of times they change often and you get new ones every day. You get like 10 to 12 new pages every day sometimes. So just get good at memorizing. Don't paraphrase or ad lib. Stick to the script. Unless it specifically says, again, follow directions. If it specifically says that you can, that's fine. But otherwise, learn the material as it is written. Now, if you deliver a perfect take and then you're like, oh no, I said that instead of then, or this or instead of that, I got the word wrong. Obviously, don't worry about it. If you gave a good performance and it was captured on film, send that. They're not going to notice it. It's not that big of a deal. But I wouldn't totally paraphrase and ad lib. I would get used to doing that, get used to memorizing words as written. I did a couple of casting director workshops lately, and I don't think I'll ever do them again, because both scene partners that I had on different nights completely went off script. And we had even worked on the scene, and then we got in front of casting directors, and I was like, what are they even talking about? So I had to stay in character and work off of them, but also make their words make sense by changing my dialogue. And it was so stressful. And it was, to me, such an amateur move on their part. I won't be going back to that workshop, I don't think. But just be a professional. Just learn it as written. You're not a better writer than these writers most of the time. Here's an exception of where you can ad lib, though, is if there's a button at the end of the scene. So the last moment of the scene, if the last line of dialogue is said and your character, you're still in character and you blurt out a little something, like call me, and it works and it's something the character would say next, that's fine. Casting directors love buttons. They expect them, particularly in comedy, that's like your opportunity to bring your own little humor and joke to it. So don't be afraid to ad lib a little button at the end of it, but don't ad lib in the middle, unless it's really minor and really in the character. And if it just kind of comes out that's fine, obviously. But again, just don't distract from the story. Don't try to rewrite anything. When you get a request for a self-tape audition, do it as soon as possible. The sooner the better. The sooner they come in. Statistically, what I've heard and read from several different sources is that most of the self-tapes, most of the actors that get it are the ones that turn it in first. Just statistically, they're usually one of the very first submissions. And I think that's because, to me, that's just a nice demonstration of somebody's work ethic. If they're turning around a self-tape that fast, they're probably on top of their game and have worked really hard at their craft, and they're very good, and they're taking it seriously, and they care a lot. And so maybe that's just a reflection of that work ethic. But I also think that if you really nail it and they see it first, then they're going to compare everything they see after that to what you did. And I think that can be a really good thing. So make it a practice. Don't ever turn it in late. Don't make excuses. Don't email them and ask for more time. Just figure it out and get it back to them. As a rule, make sure that the file after you finish your tape and you're going to send them the file, usually it needs to be downloadable. So just make sure, if you're uploading it to Vimeo or something, that you check the setting that it's downloadable. Again, they'll always tell you the way that they like to receive files. Some really like Dropbox, some like WeTransfer. Do what that casting director likes. when in doubt, email them a link to wherever you uploaded it on Vimeo. Make sure it's private or password protected, and just make sure that you check the setting that it's downloadable so they can put it into a different format to show the producers if they want to. My next advice is just practice, practice, practice. Your job is to audition. If you are an auditioning actor, that is what your acting career looks like right now. You're not like, I'm going to audition so I can have an acting career. This is what your career looks like. And for a lot of us, most of the time, this is what the career looks like. So your job is to audition. So get very good at auditioning, practice, find sites online. My advice would be to find a bunch of sides, print out a bunch of options. Like I have 10 sides, like 10 sets of sides that I have found online that are right for my casting that I can use to practice with. And I'll number them, and I'll ask my husband to pick a number between 1 and 10. And then whatever number that is the one that I have to practice, and then the next day put on tape. Now, the reason I do this is because a lot of times we get auditions for things that we don't feel like auditioning for right now. But that's how it happens. It's like, I might have like a really, really bummer day and then be like, oh no, I have to put this comedy audition on tape and it's 16 pages. Yeah, you don't get to pick what you get thrown at you. So get used to rising to the occasion, whatever the circumstances are. That is your job. Your job as an actor, as a working actor, is to be competent under stressful situations and doing things that you don't necessarily feel like doing, and being able to rise to the occasion and pull it off. So my advice to you would be to practice doing that, and practice having a good attitude about it, and practice doing your best work in whatever circumstances, whatever is required of you to do. So practice, 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 and get a buddy, get an actor buddy to just like practice doing self-tapes with. Also, weaudition.com is a website where you can, I think it's like a monthly membership, and you can log on there and see who else is logged on, so you can have a reader and they'll read with you to practice being your reader, which is another great solution if you don't have a reader in your house, and none of your friends are available. You can go on weaudition.com, find somebody to read with you. You upload your sides so they have the sides, and then on your computer they can be your reader and you can self-tape. Actually, I think now they have a thing where you can actually hit record and it records your end of it, which becomes your self-tape, which I can do too, by the way. LosAngelesActingCoach.com. If you want to coach something and it's also needs to be a self-tape, I can record your side of it so that we can work on it. And then at the end of our session, you have a file that you can send to the casting director. Keep in mind that the number one most important ingredient for a self-tape, for a good self-tape, is a good performance. So we talked about a lot of technical stuff. Nothing is as important as knocking it out of the park, just showing them that you're good. Just give a good, solid, truthful performance. So that means that you just have to get really good at being an actor. So practice audition as much as you can. Be in a class. If you can't be in a class, I'm offering online classes right now. Read scenes with other actors, whatever it takes. But if you would like to schedule one-on-one coaching with me, you can go to LosAngelesActingCoach.com and send me a message. You can email me at coach@LosAngelesActingCoach.com. And reach out to me if you want to take I'm doing an online monologue class, and I think I'm going to do an online audition class soon. Final 2 questions. How do you do a full body slate? Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because this was in my notes and I didn't bring it. Up. So full body slate, have the camera far enough away to get your full body. Don't do a pan if you can. I've heard that casting directors don't like that. Some casting directors have said that they don't mind a full body still shot, which is awesome. I know that's not really a slate. So if you can do a slate where you say, hey, I'm April, I'm 6'2", just kidding, I'm 5'4". Like you can do that. There's a little joke of the video. You're welcome, America. So do that. You can do that in the slate and then maybe like throw in a still of your full body. I have heard a casting director say she didn't mind that, so maybe. But otherwise, I just have the camera back up. If they can see beyond your little studio space that you've made, when you back out that much, they can see my weird green screen hanging in the corner here and my table with my picture frames. That's fine. They know you're not in a studio. They know you're doing this from home. They just need to see what your full body looks like. So just do it. Do the full body slate and then change the frame for your audition and then edit the two together. If you don't already have it, iMovie is an app that's on almost everybody's iPhone. I think it's on everybody's iPhone. It's super easy to cut videos together. Any advice for buttons on serious dramatic scenes? I mean, as a general rule, I don't do it unless I really feel a need to, if I really have something to offer or to say that works, but I wouldn't do it just to do it. But if you feel like it's going to add to it or show a little bit more of something that you want them to see in you, then maybe do it. I feel like I'm much more likely to do that in a comedy audition, because comedy, I think, allows for improvisation a little bit more. So as a general rule, so I don't know that I have any, my advice really would be to just, if it's true to the character and it adds to the scene and it's not distracting and it feels organic and it feels truthful to the character, and then I would say, whatever might come out. But I think for dramatic scenes, it's more important for them to see your emotional life than it is for them to see what kind of other line of dialogue that you might come up with. So I hope that makes sense. I think that might be, I think we're a little bit of a delay. So I want to make sure no questions come through. But I think that might be all I have. So if you're watching this after the live stream and you're just watching this on YouTube and you have other questions, please drop it in the comments or send me an email. I might be able to edit this or add to it or do a follow-up video. If I have enough demand, I might do a live stream like this that talks about emotional preparation. So I know a lot of this was very technical, but if you all want to talk about emotional preparation for scenes or for auditions and how to break down scenes, we can do that. I would love to do that. So let me know. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, this Easter Sunday, and I hope you're all staying safe. And if you're going outside, wearing masks and gloves and staying sane, and stay positive or not. You don't have to be. Just be where you are. And document. Thank you. And document your life. I think it's really important for us to be documenting what we're living and what we're seeing right now. So I'm going to end the stream now. I love you all.